Great. Hello, everyone. I hope we're all doing well this Saturday morning. It's a bit chilly in Johannesburg, but we're braving it out. And I'm just so happy and excited to be here with you all, joined by Ms. Rachel Jones. Before we get into the introduction, just a overview of the session that we're talking about today is focused on self-awareness and emotional intelligence. Rachel and I felt that we were tasked with two big fundamental pillars of self-development, but we will do our best to tackle it in the best way that we can. Just a short introduction of Rachel, and you'll get to know more about her journey when we start talking, but she's a systems coach with 20 years of work experience and facilitator and change agent in the business, NGO, and government sector. And she says that she's actually driven to support individuals, partnerships, and teams to improve their effectiveness, agency, and by unlocking the potential and blocks in their relationship. So we're very lucky to have her on this platform. And she's also a senior associate with Rio's partners, and they assist people who often have divergent views, work on shared concerns like food security, climate change, and social cohesion. And in her free time, she volunteers for Home of Hope, and it's a shelter that restores the dignity of girls and young women who have been impacted by human trafficking and are orphaned or are vulnerable and in risky situations. She also loves to dance and is an avid porter who makes one-of-a-kind creations. Good morning, Rachel, and welcome to this platform.
Good morning, Tariro. It's really good to be here, and thank you to WomenLeading for the invitation.
Yes, thank you so much, WomenLeading, for facilitating this topic, and Pilo and Mike for just bringing us together to talk about something that is very close to our hearts. And we are very excited to just have this platform and to share with you and possibly learn from each other as well. So we'll just dive into some of the questions. Before we do, I will introduce myself. I'm Tariro Bure. I actually work at the Mandela Institute for Development Studies, and there I am helping to build a Pan-African movement for youth networks. And that is actually one of the touch points or the initial points that I encountered Rachel, and we had this audacious goal of bringing a few networks together to co-create an experience that would help them come together and also think about how they can drive a youth-led movement. And she was so passionate about the topic, and she came in and just brought us together and diffused the ice or whatever barriers we had because we're from different countries. So from my perspective, it speaks truly to how she cares about her work and how she is invested in bringing different people together towards a similar cause. So I'm very excited to dive into the questions. So Rachel, we're gonna just start with the kind of getting to know how your journey has been so far. And as I was reflecting on this question, I thought, well, my journey as a female leader, that's very interesting. And it was something that took me back to my first work experience. And this is like out of university. And I had to, like throughout my years, even from high school, I just knew that one of the fundamental things that I had to embrace and take forward was hard work. If I worked hard, I'm fine. And that's the only thing I needed to know, and then going into the workplace, it was quite an interesting, or I would say a shift in my perspective, because it was not only me having to work hard, but navigating the space as like a young female leader. And even in my very small team that I was working in, I was the only woman. And I realized quickly, but also like had to catch up on that aspect, that being a woman in certain spaces or leading certain spaces, it requires some level of knowledge that you're not given at some like in the education system. It requires like leading self. It requires knowing how to relate and link those parts of yourself to others. So I am really curious, because you have a breadth of experience, especially in the social impact field, and you have had to connect with different people from diverse backgrounds. How has your own journey of leadership been like as a woman?
Thanks, Tariro, for the question. I think what was so interesting for me when we were, when I was reflecting on this, is just how I think my journey as a leader was very much driven by a sense of purpose. So from a young age, I think the strong driver has been wanting to be of service and wanting to create a world that is more humanized and more inclusive. So that was always a strong driver. And so that shaped what I studied, which I studied social work initially. And I realized on reflecting on this question that I've been in environments that were always female led. And so it's, I feel like I was really lucky because I have a soft kind of leadership style, and I get quite a lot of feedback that sometimes I'm not tough enough, or I'm not hard enough, or I want to say directive, but it's more like pushy or maybe bossy even. And that I think I've had to come to terms with, and still am coming to terms with, the fact that I have a kind of servant leadership, that my style is very much about creating spaces for others. And like, I get so much joy. I mean, when you speak about that workshop that we shared together, so much joy when people connect with each other, where they gain new insights, where they have the opportunity to think about how they can work together in a new way and create a, fundamental impact in the environments that they're in. And so, I guess that the key things are that I guess I have a very feminine kind of leadership. It's soft, it's about creating space for others, and that my edge and growth area is really about stepping into my own power, and trusting my own confidence, and also trusting the kind of subtlety that I bring, that it's not an arm, it's much more heart-centered. And it doesn't work for every environment. Like, I have done work in the private sector, and I think the softness stands out, and it's seen as weakness rather than as a strength, and vulnerability and heart-centeredness is not seen positively in those environments. And I think the challenge has been just trusting that this is who I am, and that I can bring my best self and make the best contribution when I am this person, But it does, I think what you spoke to is about enabling environments. And, if I'm put in those environments, I'm not going to be bringing my best self. So I'm really lucky that the organization that I work for is very aligned with my purpose and my values, and the people around me, we have alignment there. And so it feels like that is valued. And I know that a lot of other people have to fight a lot harder for being themselves in the environments that they're in.
Wow, that's really powerful. I think, like you pointed out, a very fundamental thing about being your own self and like having this environment which allows you to to kind of take like grow into your own self. I would say that for me, to be honest, like especially after I'd left my first experience, I felt so disempowered by um I felt like I couldn't do anything, not like, and that kind of fed into like saying, oh well, maybe I'm just not good enough for different at different levels. And like what you were saying, and now, like, I don't know how it happened. It was just I guess like a plan from the universe. I ended up being steered into a direction where I had female leadership, and it was just quite life changing, in terms of just like being given the space to grow into your own power. I remember the first year or the first few months when I was very confused about where I was going to go and how I was going to do anything. One of the founder of our organization, Ms. Michelle, asked me, "So, what are your plans? What do you want to do?" And I said, "I don't know." And she said, "Yes, you're here, you're home. Like, this is home, and then you learn to fly." So I just found that very powerful. And I don't know, it gave me that space to feel like, yes, I'm here to perform, but I'm here to learn as well and just like take over control of who I'm supposed to be. And that has been an interesting growth experience. So I'm also like happy that you had similar experiences which just helped you feel more comfortable in how you lead, and your journey has been empowering for you.
Yeah, I think I mean, when you said that Mrs. Michelle said you're home, I just got these kind of goosebumps. I think everyone deserves to be in environments where they feel at home, where they feel like, and where she said, now you can fly, I think we all deserve, that.
Mm, that's true. That's true. I think we can move on to the next question. It's more of like now touching onto the core of this conversation, in terms of how did you develop the character trait of self-awareness and emotional intelligence? And this is like a big one. I think also, like when we previously discussed it, it might be like tied back to also parts of your journey. And for me, I would say that I didn't know what these things were until I went to a high school that was teaching them. It wasn't something apparent. And what I'm learning, and also what we discussed before, is that it's a long life practice. But I'm curious, and I'm pretty sure the audience is curious to find out how you did develop those two major elements that are pivotal to just crushing it in your work or crushing it in life. If you know self, you're good. You're on another level, I would say.
When you say crushing it, I don't know if I feel like I've crushed it,
So I would say I would interject, sorry about that. The fact that you actually said that, I mean, like self-awareness, you're always checking yourself. So you're crushing it. Yes, sorry, please go on.
Yeah, I think the first point of shaping that self-awareness was studying social work. Like I said to you, I had this strong desire from a young age to be of service, and I so appreciate that the opportunity to have trained as a social worker, because they're very rigorous on this self-awareness and emotional intelligence aspect. And I think one of the core things that I took out of it that really applies to the work that I'm doing now is that you've got to really be aware of how you show up, and that self-awareness is not only just for, I know myself, but I know myself, and I know my blind spots, and I know my unconscious bias, and I know how I'm showing up so that I am not causing harm. If I want to have an impact, then I need to be self-aware. And it came from that place rather than just a place of, oh, I know myself, and then I know how to navigate myself in the world, but more I know myself so that I know that when I say I'm helping, I can check that, you know. I think, you know, as a white person, and as a white person in this country, we have to be really aware of those places, you know, that we think we're trying to help, and we being a white savior, or we think we, you know, supporting someone, and we're actually harming someone. So I think that for me is a big aspect of self-awareness for me in my life, and the way that I want to be in this world, you know, that the strong driver is to make things better. And I know that I haven't always, make lots of mistakes all the time. And I think that's also the, you know, the gift about life's journey, is that you learn best from the mistakes, not when you're crushing it, as you say.
That's true. That's true. That's true. And how was I'm curious to find out how the experience, especially when you started practicing community work, how it's kind of spoke to this theme, and how it interacted, like the idea of knowing self or learning to know self while helping others at that level. I can imagine that it was very tasking, and you felt yourself sometimes being pulled in different directions.
I think, yeah, I mean, your question comes at me, and a few things come to mind. So I think because I have this softness, there's a level of sensitivity that I have to environments around me. Like I'm an empath, so it can be a gift and it can be a curse. And I guess that's also part of developing, you know, sort of emotional intelligence. And I mean, I don't know how the books would define, you know, this is what EQ is. But for me, it would be knowing yourself and knowing your boundaries, you know, like knowing your limitations as a human being. And I think I have, over the last 20 years, because of this strong desire to be of service, because of wanting to be helpful, have burnt out several times, and even at one point broken down. I call it, I had a breakdown and a breakthrough, where I spent 6 months at home really recovering, and from the kind of pressure I put myself under. So I call it kind of knowing where your yes and your no is. And that has been a real edge for me, because it's almost like loving myself enough to say no, and disappointing others, or setting boundaries, or being firm, which is hard for me in my sort of style. But I notice that when I'm clearer and firmer with that softness, like it's a really good place. And yeah, so I don't know, have I answered?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so it's about, yeah, setting, I think, boundaries and limits, as well as, you know, wanting to be of service
to others, and then for yourself as well. I think I'm also there. I'm trying to learn that very slowly but surely, because being more aware, I think it just links to how you interact with yourself, and you choose what is for you. And I think even linked to the first part that we discussed about my first work experience, I had to kind of come to a conversation with myself where I said, why am I fighting for something that I know might not be linked to where I want to go? Not like saying it's terrible, but is this for me? And I think we might have that luxury to just have that conversations with ourselves and learning to have those conversations, because for me, to be honest, I didn't know how to even have those conversations with myself and really interrogate how my purpose, as you said before, like knowing how your purpose fits into the journey that you're traveling and or where you want to go.
Mm.
Mm.
I love what you said about it's sort of like I didn't know how to have those conversations, and I think we put a lot of our pressure on ourselves to have arrived, you know, and I think we only learn as we go, like, oh, that doesn't quite fit and that doesn't quite fit, and then it's like you realize why it doesn't fit, you know, and then you ask the questions, you know, because I think sometimes we try and make things fit, or yeah. So I love what you said about it's like we learn as we go along, and it's it really is a
Yeah.
step by step, you know.
That's true. And like, just going back to what you said before, after you had kind of like your breakdown and breakthrough, did you feel that shift within yourself? Was it different in how you like nurtured yourself even?
Mm. I get an image when you say how you nurtured yourself. It felt like it's an ongoing nurturing to choose that place rather than the old place, you know, of pushing or driving. And you know, I constantly fall off and get back on. But I think the value of having gone to the very bottom of the bottom in myself of that breakdown, it feels like I know where that edge is much sooner than I did. I think what took me there is I actually didn't know what was this? Why wasn't I feeling well or okay? I couldn't put my finger on it. It took me a long time to figure it out. But now I'm much more aware. So as soon as I start feeling some of those places, I know how to bring myself back more easily now. So, but it's taken a long time, you know, years, like 7 years to sort of get on this side of the road rather than on that side.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's true. And I just feel like I'm even scratching the surface as well for me. And I'm looking forward to just navigating that space. But also I completely agree with you when you said something about like knowing that you have to just move forward. You can't then go back because it doesn't feel right anymore. Also, I like speaking about self. I would like we touched on the idea of self-love, and I'm curious to know how you were able to cultivate your self-love as a leader, always faced with some kind of setbacks or like failures. How that was, how that experience came to be about loving self in different spaces, you know, when you have to work or, you know, like just navigating through life. I mean, for me, when I reflected about this, I thought, I guess for like the realization comes through when I feel like even though I am performing, I'm still betting against myself when I'm not completely trying to love myself or nurture myself, because it felt like that realization that everything is interconnected, the self and what I do and how I contribute, you know, like I am working in the youth empowerment space. And I was like, how can I be in empowerment if I'm not empowering myself, you know? And um, it's just yeah, it's crazy because you get that disconnection a lot of times, and that just, I feel like, to me, it made me sad sometimes, or it just overwhelmed me, like, because I just couldn't link what I was doing to some extent, or did I believe in it so much that I would do the same for myself, when you overwork, or just try to not be in your own skin, from your experience, how you were able to cultivate that self-love, especially as a leader. And, we always have these challenges coming to us from left, right, center, and
Yeah, I just love how you've unpacked this question, through your own experience, and the words that stand out for me: betting against yourself, and I think it's a constant challenge, and yeah, what's coming to mind is that it's it's a spectrum, and there's I'm just trying to find the right words here. It's like, I think somewhere we have, or maybe I have, this expectation, maybe you do too, that we've got to be confident all the time, and we've got to know everything all the time, and then we're okay, and then we can love ourselves, or then we can feel okay in ourselves. And I think when we are growing, when we are pushing up against learning something new, or being in a new environment, or being in a different environment, I think there needs to be some permission about not feeling like we slaying it, that we're still figuring things out. And I think that's where maybe the self-love lens can come in, where it's not only when we feel like we're in our superpowers, but when we're also like feeling our way or trying to figure something out, that we can give ourselves the room to be that as well. And I think that the thing that really helps, I struggle with, like, self-doubt is a huge voice inside me. And I think what really helps is to have great sounding boards around you. Like for me, like just to have people who can talk back to you in a different voice and say, like, no, but like I have this great coach, and he asked me yesterday, because I was in a self-doubt conversation with him. He calls it the saboteur, that betting against yourself. And he said, where's that data coming from? Like, he was like checking, where did you get that information from? And there was nothing in the external environment that was telling me, the voices, well, I hope we all have them in our head, otherwise I'm the only loopy one. You're useless, you're stupid, you ugly, you don't know what you're doing, and so I think it really helps to have people that can cross-check some of that stuff, where we can have sort of islands of sanity. And I'm stealing this phrase from a systemic a leader that has taught me a lot about how to work in systems, Margaret Weekly. She says, at this time of disruption, we need to find islands of sanity for ourselves. And I think it's really important to find those places, and I'm lucky enough to afford a coach or someone like a therapist where you can go to and get sort of work for your inner world, but also to have friends or communities. And there's always like wise elders, in our lives that we can, it might even be someone who, an elder might not be an age, but just in terms of the area that you feel like you need to develop in, to, get a support system around that can really cross-check those those places in yourself, you know.
Mm-hmm. So you said islands of sanity.
Islands of sanity.
I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. Like just finding a space within that helps you, or people who can, you know, cross check whatever you're feeling and saying to yourself. And the issue that you kind of stressed in the beginning of the answer was about like us wanting to get to some point to then like fully love ourselves. And I guess it speaks to the idea as well that you can never get to that point, right? Because even if you feel like you're now there, like I have gotten maybe a master's, then I start feeling like, okay, maybe I have to have a PhD. Or like even in like real life situations when I finally be able to give myself this, you know. And it resonates with me so much because now a book I was recently reading by Eckhart Tolle about the power of now and like just being in the present moment, and that speaks to also just accepting yourself in this moment, no matter how shabby it looks or how imperfect it is. So imperfect, I meant. And I think that you really touched on like a very important point about really just being in the now and trying to accept who you are and having people who also are sounding boards to your journey. Yeah. So I would also want to, link this to kind of the next question. And because we've talked about, I guess, self-awareness and emotional intelligence and how that it's like what we are talking about is very connected, and it has that underlying theme of just knowing self, and then after knowing self at the same time nurturing that person that you are and that you're living with. But I guess I'm curious to know as well that as a leader, there are seasons where you might be overwhelmed, exhausted with all the responsibilities that you have. And how do you prioritize your emotional wellness?
Mm. I feel like I want to throw the question back at you a little, if that's okay. I think as we've been going through this conversation, I've been thinking about, you know, what it's like to be a woman in these times, a younger woman in these times. I can't believe I'm saying that, like that I'm an older, I don't know how that happened, but, and I'm just, you know, I hear a lot of, I have the privilege of working with the Mandela Rhodes Foundation and helping create a space for the scholars who get the scholarship to really develop themselves as leaders, to reconcile things, to work with their own areas that they want to make impact in, and support each other as a community of young African leaders. And I just hear so much about this exhaustion and overwhelmed, you know. And so, you know, I have found ways that work for me, you know, and it can be like even just short moments, not big moments of like being hugely disciplined in a self-care practice, which I would love to be, but I always fall off the wagon. But even just, you know, taking small moments of, okay, what do I need right now? Like you spoke about this Eckhart Tolle, being, you know, in the now, and operating with like what can support me right now in the moment to fill up my cup. But I think about, I've just been thinking about, as you've been talking, just what it feels like to be looking ahead in the future of the world, as it is now, with such enormous disruption and challenges. And yes, there's opportunity, but how do you manage as a young leader in the face of that? Like, what happens for you when you see this world and you think, okay, I want to make a difference in it, which you clearly do. And how do you, like, I guess, what are your islands of sanity? What do you do?
In practical terms, I would start with like what I have started learning to do, which is mostly like exercising and just finding that space to, like to get my mind clear, because it's always a lot of information coming to at us. Like we are living also in the social media era. And on social media, you will learn, even on LinkedIn, where you're supposed to connect with people, you see, this person is doing that. Oh my gosh, wow. And it comes at you, right? And I just kind of had to, I don't know how it happened for me, but I just started practicing even yoga, and especially now running, especially with this lockdown. And it has just been very much of a process that I do not even schedule for, but I just feel my body saying, okay, we need that time to get out of our minds and just start doing something. So that has been very great, I would say, like as a practice. I feel like it's more than exercise, it's more than like trying to look good. It's a spiritual exercise, because you are literally like blank, and you only have that connection with mind, body, spirit, and that is all that is needed. You don't need to look good. I'm pretty sure people look at me. I have gone beyond that idea of saying they're gonna say, because before I was feeling anxious, like, oh my god, I'm walking, running, walking, riding, I'm not so good, but it's fine. And the process is the most beautiful thing. And I think practices such as that are really beautiful because they connect to a process. And it's not about getting there, it's about refining, it's about accepting that Monday was terrible, but Wednesday was good. And Friday, I couldn't even do anything, but I can. So that process is very transformative, and it's kind of healing. And then I want to go back to the idea of the responsibilities part. So, like the Mandela Rhodes Fellows, that kind of experience, I also was like selected to do this African Leadership Academy 2-year program in high school. And it kind of like gives you that responsibility. Like, you're empowered with such great leadership skills. It's amazing. But also, the narrative surrounding that is that you're the leaders who are going to change Africa. And so I, like before, throughout this experience, I haven't really internalized that kind of responsibility. You're just like in the moment, right? But as soon as I was like coming out of that experience, now going to university, I started realizing like this is such a great experience, a great responsibility, because it's a continent with, I remember someone said with like, with 55, with 1 billion realities, 55 countries, you can't really like wrap your head around that. And so it was like having, knowing how to connect to it. And it's the same thing as well, even in the workplace, right? You have this big task of like creating a movement, and you don't even know like who. I've been in countries I didn't know anything. It's a French country, and I have to organize a meeting, and I just can't find myself saying, wow, I'm not doing this again, but I wake up and do it again. I don't know, because I guess you feel like you're up to the challenge. But when I started synthesizing it more, and because when I thought about it as a big responsibility, I don't think it was doing so much benefits, especially to my health. Like I just felt overwhelmed, and I'm like, no, I can't do this. But then I realized that the change was mostly like supposed to be with me first, because I can't go out and change a whole like continent. It's not possible. But I have started simplifying, and that I think has been the most empowering thing, that if I'm a good citizen, like just putting it in bite-sized form, it contributes to that bigger vision. And I don't have to like start thinking about everything that's going wrong, because there's so much going wrong, but like also tuning in to what is going right. So yeah, in terms of like practical terms, it has been that, and like, the whole exercise stuff. And then also like just trying to break down these goals, break down this responsibility, and not feel like I have to do everything. And I think that has been the narrative for my first few years working, trying to do everything, because I felt like I could, which would end up going wrong. And I'm like, oh, but I had the best intentions. But it's also because I didn't feel like I could put myself in at a, like, at a high level, such that I would say, well, but I need to rest, or well, but I can't do everything, and it's fine, so yeah, I hope I answered the questions. So I felt like, I was doing stuff well, but now I'm realizing that there are other ways of doing it, and other ways which do not drain you, other ways where you don't feel like you have to bear the burden of the world. So yeah, I think that's been helpful. I'm not so sure if I missed something, but those three things have been quite important in me, like trying to even like move through this year when there's been a lockdown and we don't know what's going to happen. Plans were derailed, and there were some opportunities to grow that we thought were going to be the moments we were waiting for them, but it's changed. And I guess also one other thing is like having to detach my identity, or from what I do, because yeah, I think I asked someone when I went to the Free State. I'm used to that because I'm in this space. Like, I'm like, oh, so what do you do? And she said, I would rather not answer in that way. It's, I'd like to express who I am in a different way. So I'm also learning that, because I do not want to only be that person who has created this for this person, or who has worked here, and just trying to find identity beyond where I went to school or what I do on a 9-to-5 basis, but who is Tariro in the grand scheme of things. So yeah, I think I can add that I'm an amateur runner now, which is great. Yeah, so different aspects like that. And how has it been for you? I feel like I did a long winding answer, but it's just I was throwing everything that I am reflecting on here on this conversation.
It's really, I really appreciate your sharing, and I'm sure that there are a lot of people in the audience that can identify with, the things that you've said. I loved what you said about, you know, this bite size, like remembering to like not take on the whole burden of the world. And I think, you know, that's a challenge for me as well, just feeling so responsible. And that and maybe it speaks to the question that you asked about the overwhelmed and exhaustion, that we have to find those antidotes, you know, in our lives, like things that bring joy, that really feed our, like for me it would be like feed my soul, you know. So like, you know, being frivolous and silly and playful, and, you know, like remembering to access that buoyancy rather than the burden and responsibility. And yeah, I think I wonder what kind of world we live in if we were coming more from that place of connecting to joy, you know, rather than this sort of huge responsibility, huge pressure, huge demands. And I think, you know, the gift of this COVID, as devastating as it is, and, you know, it really has revealed the enormous cracks in our society. It's also slowed us down. You know, we can't be running around as fast as we used to. And somewhere there's a gift in that, slowing down, connecting, quality rather than quantity. And I think it speaks on, you know, that quality and quantity thing. You know, I think perhaps the exhaustion and the overwhelm comes from us putting a huge demands, rather than really coming from a place of quality time, or, you know, even buying less or needing less or doing less, you know, all of those things. So I think perhaps in a few years we'll see the great wisdom of this time, and hopefully, you know, have embedded it in ourselves.
Yes, that is so profound. That is true. Like now we have this time to not fill up our weekends as well with something, or fill up our days with something. And I know we touched on this a bit. You said something quite interesting about like also being kinder to yourself even with this type of activity, you know, like I don't know if you want to go into that, like having because you know you even put pressure. Now I know you maybe you love dancing or you practice yoga, and then whenever you don't do it, you're like, why? Now you're even compounding the stuff that is supposed to help you.
Yeah, I loved I loved your runner's story, and it's so easy to have that lens on the outside, you know, I mean, you think that someone's watching. No one's actually generally watching. Look, I know that there are people watching us now, and that's, you know, we've got over ourselves with that. But often this lens inside ourselves where you're watching yourself and telling yourself some stupid story about how well you're doing or whatever. And I think that's when you spoke about your running as a transformative experience, that somewhere you let that go, you know. And I think it's to find places where we can get to know these parts of ourselves that I'm going to take away betting against yourself. That's going to be my new awareness. You know, these parts that we get in our own way, you know, we get in our own way, and to sort of liberate ourselves, or find those practices where we can feel a bit freer, you know.
Right?
Yeah, freer and lighter, and not push through that, more like drop that, ignore that, or tell it to sit down and shut up for a while, you know.
You can give it space and you hear it out and you're like, okay, no, I don't agree with you. Thank you. Thank you for your contribution. That is true. And
It's
I
a very
try to, yeah, I try to practice it. Like it's related to the book I was talking about, the Eckhart Tolle. Like it's like think about your next thought, and then it completely like goes away, right? Or when you're having a negative thought, you're like, okay, let me pay more attention to it. And I am not a master of this because my thoughts are like this. Like I just have so many thoughts at the same time. But when I tried it for the few seconds that I did, I realized that it just goes away. And it's crazy. I'm like, wow.
give it so much power usually.
Mm,
Yeah.
that's true. That's true. Um, But also, like from this whole conversation that we've been having, are there any like tips that you can give to me, someone who's just learning and like just trying to navigate the space and I'm like trying to get into my power as a young female leader or a young leader in general, just to also like, move beyond any of these barriers and just like as you said, I loved when you were talking about your journey, like you not only realized what works for you, what environment works for you, but you're able to identify how you are in certain environments. And you're also able to identify, because we had this conversation yesterday about how some of these leadership styles are coming from a disempowered space, or whatever is held so greatly, it's usually like not coming from the best place. So do you have and I would feel like I feel like you can always feel the authenticity of the source of how someone where someone is coming from. Do you have any tips for like audience on how on leading with purpose, or like just being more self-aware?
Mm. I think maybe apart from everything that I've said, I'd want to add, and I don't know how you experience community, I think I think if we can amplify community a bit more, I think that would really help, like to create sort of conscious spaces where we can be together in a deeper, richer way, and you hear about people running their own women's circles or having sort of supportive groups, and I think sometimes they happen sort of naturally, like you've got 10 friends or 5 friends and you all get together and then you talk about whatever it is that you're struggling with, or you celebrate the joys together, you even feel jealous of each other, or whatever those things are. But like, I think if we can create more intentional spaces where we say we're really getting together to be of support to each other in this way, I think that's really key in this time where, like you say, the world is around, like we're on these technology platforms even more than ever, and to really kind of remind ourselves of our own and each other's humanity as an antidote for what's happening. So yes, look after ourselves, and find your joy, and hopefully find enabling environments that support you as what you feel like you've come to do here in this world. But I think conscious, intentional community is powerful. Is powerful.
Mm, that is true. That is true. I love that. And it's I mean, like you did mention the social media part, like we feel so much connected, but we're very disconnected. And we like, especially now the newer generations, like the most disconnected and loneliest generations, but we have 500 connections, virtual, 600 friends on Facebook, yet you don't have spaces to really like be linked spiritually to other people or just talk about empowering things. So I definitely agree with you. And I think I would like to thank you for having this conversation with me. And I think you embody this this value, this conversation, what we were talking about. And I know you would say in a humble manner that you are still learning, and I agree with that. It's a lifelong journey. But I mean, even I had like like this experience with you yesterday when we were talking about self-awareness from my angle, and you were able to point it out, but in the most authentic way that I felt so much like, I was like, this is Rachel, like demonstrating how she knows herself, and also she is teaching in the same moment. And I'm pretty sure it might not have been a situation where you wanted to teach, but that's exactly what you did. And I feel like your presence from the time I met you, it was 2 years ago, right? Yeah, 2 years ago. It's that level of self-awareness, or like that practice of trying to know self, that practice of trying to walk in the moccasins, walk in the other people's shoes, and that balance, you are always effortlessly training yourself to achieve, that makes us all feel like we are empowered around you. And I'm pretty sure Mpilo, who's the organizer, would say the same. I just appreciate you for opening up the space, not only for myself, but for other people who are watching, who might have had a block somewhere, but you managed to like open it up for them. The same as for myself, maybe there's something that you brought out that I never knew was there. I think when you took the question back to me, I was like, oh, wow, okay, it's interesting. And I feel like I can respond to this from what I just am learning. So yeah, I would love to thank you for doing that for not only myself, but the audience. I don't know if you have any last words, messages that you would like to relate to the world while we're still here.
No, I think you've given me enough space to say things. So I really, again, appreciate the opportunity to, have an opportunity to think and reflect for myself. I feel like I've taken a lot away from this, and it was a joy to be with you again, Tariro. And, I'm so inspired by young Black African women. Like I'm in awe of you, and I just see like your vision to make an impact and to grow and to be, your best selves and live your best life. And
Yes,
I so admire you, and thank you for this opportunity.
it goes both ways, Rachel. Thank you so much. Yes, so with that, we will conclude the session on self-awareness and emotional intelligence. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed this ourselves. I don't know, Rachel, if you have any resources or online presence that we can just share now, or people can, if there are any places people can learn more about this topic that you would recommend.
Off the top of my head, I can't think right now, but if people want to put something in the chat box, I can maybe respond.
Yeah, exactly. So put your comments in the chat box if you're live on Facebook, and also you can contact Obuma Leadership for any questions, and they'll be sure to relay them to us, and we'll try our best to answer them or to give some resources and tips on the topic. I hope we set on to this day, to the Saturday that you're about to have, and that you will nurture yourself and treat yourself with kindness. We sure are very happy to have started off our day like this. And we wish you a beautiful day ahead. Thank you.